It's a bridge at the entrance of the city of Beijing. There was a verbal argument between Japanese officials and Chinese officials. The oral argument turned into a full-scale war that started years before World War II. The war resulted in the death of millions of Chinese and, in the end, split China into two factions and started a civil war. Japan's expansion, and China's downfall. Japan had a militaristic society controlled by feudal leaders for centuries. Japan moved from a feudal system to democracy, but it was short-lived. The Japanese military exerted a significant influence on the Japanese government. Japan expanded its imperialistic expansion to counter the effects of the Great Depression. Also, Japan's leaders felt they needed to acquire colonies in Asia as the Western powers were. Japan started its expansion with the annexation of Korea. China had a vast empire and traded silk, tea, and other valuable materials with the West. The trade was lucrative and made China a prosperous country. Britain bought tea from China but was not able to trade another commodity for it. The British Empire ended up with a large trade deficit with China, which put pressure on the British East India Company to find a commodity that China can buy from Britain or India. That product was opium. The British East India Company was able to cultivate opium in present-day Afghanistan and India and exported it to China illegally. China banned the trade of opium in its territories. Still, the company was able to sneak in the opium, which balanced the trade deficit. The Chinese government took stringent action against British traders involved in the opium trade and started the Opium Wars. At the end of the First Opium War, the Chinese government became weak and ceded Hong Kong to Britain. Start of conflict. By the 1890s, China was too weak to keep British, French, German, and Russian imperialists from seizing its territory. Japanese imperialists saw this scramble for territory as an opportunity to take part in the looting of China. By the 1920s, Japan was the most powerful nation in Asia, while China was weak, poor, and in civil war. In the 1930s, Japanese imperialists decided to seize as much of China as possible. Japan first targeted Manchuria, a resource-rich province of China. Japanese agents planted weak bombs on the railway tracks and blamed it on the Manchuria government and invaded Manchuria. After the annexation of Manchuria, Japan was at the doorstep of China. Japan and China entered an agreement for a ceasefire. Japan was still keen to acquire the all of China and awaited a golden opportunity. If there was no opportunity, they were ready to make one. In 1937, the Japanese army conducted war games on the Marco Polo Bridge at the Beijing city entrance. After the games, the Japanese garrison commander complained that one of his soldiers was missing. Japanese officers asked the Chinese government to allow Japanese troops to search for the missing Japanese soldier inside the city. Chinese leaders objected it and recommended that one Japanese officer can accompany the Chinese soldiers in the search operation. The Japanese garrison was not happy with the negotiations. Aftermath. The Japanese garrison came with its full strength and attacked the city. However, the Chinese army repulsed the Japanese military, which started a full-scale war. China's factions of the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese nationalists put the differences aside and joined hands to fight the Japanese. The Imperial Japanese Army would cause some of the worst horrors of the war, including the Nanjing massacre. The invasion dragged on for years, but after 1941, Britain, USSR, and the USA supported China. After Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Japan started militaristic expansion into the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia, for its oil wealth and surrendered after being hit by 2 atom bombs. From a Western point of view, World War II's official start was when Germany invaded Poland. But Japan started the aggression first when it invaded China. So technically, World War II began in 1937.